Thank you, Mr. President. I stand in support of AB973 with some cautions. The U.S. Pharmacopoeia is a respected journal, if you will, in the United States that sets standards for really manufacturers of medications throughout the country. As you know, with the advent of technology, pharmacists have gone back to the roots of their profession when we used to make everything per a doctor's order before the pharmaceutical companies grew to prominence and pharmacists were relegated more to a dispensing role and a consulting role rather than a making role. But I can tell you there's been significant growth over the past 3 decades in providing life-saving medications that do not exist in the United States and offered by commercial pharmaceuticals. Every district in the state of California has a compounding pharmacy. And we know that there are sometimes events that happen in our country where government sometimes has a knee-jerk reaction and wants to regulate to prevent recurrences of issues. There was a pharmacy on the East Coast called New England Compounding Pharmacy about 7 or 8 years ago that was not following the State Board of Pharmacy on the East Coast in Massachusetts that is responsible for regulating compounding pharmacies. They took their eye off the ball and allowed a company to become more of a quasi-manufacturer, having a sales team trying to sell their injectable drugs throughout the country, and they were not operating as a true compounding pharmacy. The sad end to that story is that more than 50 people died from an incident, from a bad batch of an injectable that caused a fungal meningitis problem and left over 300 or 400 people permanently disabled. This is a horrible incident, and I have to say since then, state boards of pharmacy across the country have engaged, learned more about what we do, and have enacted great regulations. And I want to pay tribute to our State Board of Pharmacy because they have been very proactive and have put forward great, good regulations that have closed down pharmacists that have gotten into compounding that really didn't have the education to safely dispense and compound medications. My fear with this bill, though, is that the State Board of Pharmacy can go beyond the USP standards. And I can tell you that with the regulations that exist today, the compounding pharmacies are on the brink of not being able to provide life-saving medications to people in the United States in various disciplines. I'll give you one discipline as an example. My compounding pharmacy specializes in pain control. There are some people that have such extensive pain problems that the only medications that can help them are, yes, narcotic opiates, antispasmodics, local anesthetics, in some cases general anesthetics, that are delivered into a pump that is surgically implanted in the body. And the only way that you get the medication in the pump is through a physician's office. But the only way that you can get these medications that oftentimes are more concentrated than exist on the commercial market is through a compounding pharmacy that is licensed as a compounding pharmacy, and then they get a sterile compounding license, and they, as opposed to every other pharmacy that is traditional, get inspected every year to ensure that they are complying with these very strenuous and necessary standards. If we make these regulations tougher, if we over-regulate, we are going to create an access problem for the thousands of people in the state of California that actually live a quality of life that otherwise would be relegated to an emergency room because they cannot get the medications and the concentrations that are designed to go in their pump, that is delivered in their cerebral spinal fluid, that have to be made with no preservatives, because preservatives cause tremendous damage to nerves, and we know that our spinal column is just loaded with nerve networks. So again, I stand and encourage your yes vote, but I also want to send a message to the State Board of Pharmacy that they need to be careful on going beyond USP standards and understanding the ramifications to access, because we are at that fine line now where any further regulations beyond USP could actually shut every compounding pharmacy that does sterile work in this country and help some of the most pain-afflicted patients in the United States that have their addictions controlled because only the doctor controls this pump through a magnetic wand. So in the best interest of your patients that are in your districts that go to compounding pharmacies, we should support this legislation, but we should encourage the State Board of Pharmacy to be very cautious about exceeding those regulations that cause extensive costs in the way of testing that might be redundant, that will make these products not available to the patients that truly need them. I strongly encourage your aye vote on AB 973, and thank you for your consideration.